ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, so today's video, we're going to be talking about Blood Hunt #1, written by Jed McKay, with art by Pepe Larraz and color by Marte Gracia. So suddenly, all the Dark Force users across the Marvel Comics universe have become portals unleashing the Dark Force dimension across the entire globe. Characters like Cloak, Silhouette, Blackout, Darkstar, Dusk, even the recently revealed new Moon Knight, the Shroud, are being turned into a portal for something deadly, blocking out both the sun and moon in doing so. And you know what they say, when the sun's away, the vampires will play. Vampires running roughshod across the entire Earth, everywhere except Latveria, more or less thanks to Doom's own magic wards that can burn a vampire to ash on sight. The world as a whole is This story is pretty damn interesting, and I knew it would be just based on the fact that it's Jed McKay writing it. Jed McKay is a fantastic writer. If you've not kept up with any of his Doctor Strange or his Moon Knight or any of the other various books he has done over the course of the last few years, the guy knows his stuff and he is a student of the game. So there's always going to be these things that happen in his stories that just make the most amount of sense. And while before we get into the spoiler territory of it, I will definitely say there is one thing he does with this book that I think a lot of people will probably not see coming. I didn't see coming with this. I honestly was kind of thinking it would go in a completely different direction. But the fact that this is supposed to be a Blade-centric Marvel Comics crossover event, I will say it subverted my expectations on how Blade would be used in it. I will say if there's any one failing of this comic, it is kind of falling into the same tropes that you might be accustomed to whenever Marvel does some random crossover event or some major story arc or whatever. I would point to books like Avengers No Road Home or No Surrender, books that were supposed to be major story arcs, but ultimately devolved into books that introduce new superheroes and supervillains who are largely inconsequential and you know are not going to survive the story and you'll likely never see again anytime soon, if ever. And that's kind of how I feel about this. But that being said, having read this entire issue, I can say that while yes, that is the case, it's for a good reason. And while technically it is my one criticism of this book from a writing perspective, I will say that at the very least, it's done well by Jed McKay. Pepe Larraz does fantastic on the art for this book. Like I've said in other videos where I've talked about Pepe's work, he's fantastic. He's doing a very good job with the characters that are being used. His art is fantastic. There's no taking away from that. And I definitely feel like he captured the magic of a vampire takeover in his art. There's an etherealness to the new characters, the Blood Coven, that I feel is probably going to be lost on some, but yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. And then the colors by Marte Gracia are pretty damn good as well. They actually accentuate Pepe Larraz's work better than probably any other colorist up to this point. Now to get into the spoilery territory of this. I said earlier that someone has unleashed the full might of the vampires in the wake of the sun and moon being blotted out across the globe. And it ain't Dracula. Captain America brings this up in the issue, even going as far as to say that this is outside of Dracula's MO, that he has no reason to do whatever it is that he would be doing in this. And it makes sense considering the fact that he's right. Dracula has created a sovereign nation for vampires that is recognized by the United Nations. He has legitimized vampirism in the Marvel Comics universe in such a way that vampires have never been accepted before in this universe. So yeah, why would he throw that all away just to take over the world? He doesn't need it because he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to have the world. He's very much content with what he has. Dracula wanted to create a safe space for vampires to live out their lives and not be bothered by humanity, and he got it. Chernobyl is literally a place where no humans can survive for any long stretch of time, and vampires can live indefinitely. So yeah, this is someone else. And while technically I know I mentioned the Blood Coven earlier, it's not actually them either. The Blood Coven is just a coven of vampires who may or may not have watched too many Hellraiser movies, of which there are way too many past the first two films. Each of these characters look like Marvelized versions of Cenobites. And thanks to Blade, we're introduced to them. In an attempt to deliver something to the Avengers, information that will easily win the day for the Avengers, he asks the Avengers to teleport a truck where he's transporting the supposed information to the Avengers' new base, the Impossible City. And for those of you who have not been reading Jed McKay's Avengers as of late, it's a really good series. I highly recommend it. Not the best Avengers series I've ever read, but I would put it up there as being one of the more fun ones in recent memory. But in that series, when facing off with another group of villains that we'll probably never see again past their initial debut, kind of in a similar vein as some of these Blood Coven characters, the Impossible City is a sentient living ship, and it's what the Avengers have been calling home since about partway into Jed McKay's run. And honestly, kind of following in the same footsteps as Jason Aaron's Avengers before, where the Avengers had taken a dead celestial body and used it as their base of operations. But that's neither here nor there. That part is not as important as some of the other things going on here, but it is definitely a good thing for you to know that the ship is alive because it is attacked in this issue, and that's why it feels pain. But if you're wondering why the Blood Coven just so conveniently fall out of the truck, it's because Blade was the one who brought them to the Avengers. Initially, this is played off by the Blood Coven as being some sort of, oh my god, we took out Blade, and guess what? Now we're to take you guys out. But in truth, Blade was behind this the whole time. And it's funny because I remember when this event was first announced, and even up until recent, I was talking to Carter on the Blerd Cave about how I felt that this is going to be one of those events where Blade is not going to be as important to this event as some people might want to believe, that he won't even show up in this event as much as some people might want to believe. And while we had seen a lot of solicits for it, one thing I can say, we never really saw much of Blade across many of these solicits outside of him showing up on covers and knowing he was going to be a part of the Midnight Suns book. We didn't really know the full extent of why. And now we know why Marvel played so cagey with that information. It's because Blade is the bad guy. He is the villain. He is the leader of the Blood Coven, the mysterious benefactor and leader that they keep referring to, that while Bloodstorm 1 sees himself as the leader of the Blood Coven, even Bloodstorm 1 has a leader that they must answer to, and that's Blade. Now that I've said all this, man, I gotta admit, I know a lot of people are kind of mad about this. I've actually talked to some people that did not care for discovering that Blade is suddenly the bad guy, and I totally get it because I'm not gonna lie, I am not a fan of when you take a character who normally is a good guy and just for whatever reason, suddenly just because you want it to be that way, this character is the bad guy. Now, let's be fair here just for a minute. Let's put the pitchforks away for a moment. I'm willing to let Jed McKay cook on this because this is something that is not just happening from out of nowhere. There are a lot of moving parts to this, but I will definitely say when I got to the end of it and I kind of knew in the middle of it, I was like, oh yeah, Blade's the bad guy in this. And I was like, but yeah, you know what? Nah, let me let Jed McKay cook a little bit longer. But when I got to his book and saw that motherfucker was literally the whole ass bad guy of this, I was just like, boy, what are you doing? I was like, Jed, why? And then like I took a moment. I allowed myself to get hype. I allowed myself to get a little angry. But once I actually sat down and really kind of like thought about it, I was like, okay. But without further ado, let me get into the reasonings why. To be fair, Blade would be the guy. If anyone was going to organize a group of vampires to run fades on the Avengers, Blade has unified all of vampire society, having taken over the structure, something that was introduced in Jed McKay's Moon Knight series. It was, for all intents and purposes, a pyramid scheme of vampirism where vampires would sit at the top and then have vampires who, as you would imagine in a pyramid scheme, they would bring in new vampires to work as their underlings, and those vampires make new underlings, and so on and so on and so forth. And the structure was initially incepted by the Tutor, a character who was killed off in Jed McKay's Moon Knight number 18. And since then, the structure has had no leader, but before the Tutor was taken out of the game, he was trying to unify every single corner of vampire society. And where he failed to really elicit any support from the other vampire societies to join his own, Blerd seems to have stepped in the vacuum of leadership and brought everyone together, or so he seems to think. We don't know where Dracula is in all this, considering how close Blerd and Dracula have been as of late, and considering also the fact that Blerd has gotten a massive power boost during Brian Hill's Blerd series, which if you've not been keeping up with that, you can check out this playlist up here and get caught up on everything to do with that. But over the course of that series, Blerd drank Dracula's blood, and as a result, it unlocked the dormant vampiric powers that he has always lacked. Well, yes, he's had their speed, their strength, their durability, all the gifts that they would normally have, didn't necessarily have all of them. Now he has the ability to shapeshift. He can turn into a swarm of bats, a giant black wolf, or turn into mist. But all of that came with a price. Drinking Dracula's blood unlocked something within himself, and you saw him struggle with it over the course of the remainder of that series, and also him wielding the Lightbringer sword, a sword that is literally the very essence of Lucifer himself. He has been corrupted by that as well, and it makes sense now, considering the very end of the Blerd series, why the Adana was so pleased with herself that Blerd, though he thought he won, had not really won. And while what she was talking about having been unleashed might not have exactly been this, I do feel like this is at the very least a small part of it. Like I said, some of this might seem really out of character for Blerd. And while yes, I think a lot of it is, I think the thing people are gonna have to come to grips with this is that Blerd is not acting, at least in my opinion, as he normally would because of those corrupting factors that I've already mentioned. I mean, when you think about it, who else could organize a group of super vampires the way that Blerd has other than Blerd? Blood Coven being so evenly matched with the Avengers makes sense. He knows the Avengers inside and out, so of course he'd know how to take them down after being an Avenger for the last few years, even with a slight roster change up. And he knows who will kill and who won't. Wanda could end the whole thing in the blink of an eye. Something Blerd mentions, a spell within the Darkhold itself that would destroy all vampires. There are various spells that can undo pretty much any supernatural entity in existence, all in the blink of an eye. And it's not that Wanda isn't doing it because she doesn't have access to the spell. She does. The Darkhold is literally a part of Wanda Maximoff. She absorbed the Darkhold back during the Darkhold story arc just a couple of years ago. She is the Darkhold, but she's not going to do that because she knows the fallout that could happen. She is keenly aware that not every vampire is evil, and that not every vampire is involved in this, and she also is aware that she would possibly unalive some people that she cares about. Meanwhile, the one person who probably would use the spell, Doctor Strange, he's taking him off the table. Now, while it seems Blerd has backstabbed Doctor Strange for 96 D6 points of damage, the truth is, it doesn't seem like the Blood Coven nor Blerd are interested in unaliving any of the Avengers. They mention at various points they're more interested in turning them. Case in point, one of the Avengers they want more than anybody else, more than Thor, more than Vision, more than Captain Marvel, is Captain America, because of what Captain America represents, which I find very interesting just in and of itself, the fact that they want Sam Wilson, not any of the other ones. Yeah, sure, they want to turn those other people and put them on their ranks, but at the end of the day, they want Captain America, because if they have someone that is that much of a symbol, if they can bring somebody the likes of a Captain America that low to bring them down to the undead evil might of vampirism, that would be a pretty terrifying thing for whatever is left of humanity, whatever resistance is left in them, to see the symbol of patriotism and the symbol of justice and freedom trying to take away your own justice and freedom. And we know that Sam is just that important, because in the instance where all the Avengers are being taken down by the various members of the Blood Coven, characters who are more than a match for the Wanda Maximoffs of the world, being able to match them magic for magic. We see the character Megrim, who is more than a match for Captain Marvel, capable of taking advantage of some of Captain Marvel's, I won't say weaknesses, but definitely things that she's more vulnerable to than she normally wouldn't be. In this case, being magic and telepathy. It's not necessarily to say that Captain Marvel is hurt more by magic and telepathy than anyone else. It's kind of similar to DC Comics Superman. Superman doesn't have a weakness to magic that is because he takes more damage from it than anyone else. It's just that he is as susceptible to magic as any other regular person would be. And that's the same case with Captain Marvel in the case of magic and telepathy. Hence why she is out of commission in this. Characters like Damascene, who's able to cut through both Asgardian flesh and an intangible vision. At one point, we even see Thor seemingly unalived by one of these Blood Coven members. And while all of these characters are suffering at the might of the Blood Coven, even characters like Tony Stark are not left out of the equation, considering that he is being racked with pain unimaginable by the character Cruel. Once all the Avengers are, for all intents and purposes, wrapped up, like everybody has been taken down, the last two Avengers standing are T'Challa, the Black Panther, and Sam Wilson, Captain America, it just becomes this instance of Black Panther sacrificing himself and, pushing Captain America out of the way so that the impossible city can teleport him away from harm. And it's the reaction of Bloodstorm 1, the field leader of the Blood Coven, kind of letting you know, yeah, this was not just something that was maybe important to him, but maybe something specifically that Blade wanted him to do. Once again, Blade has fielded a deadly team, and each of these vampires is hopped up on superhero blood, making them even more powerful and more than a match for these Avengers. He's the one person on Earth who knows everything there is to know about vampires. He's like the Terrence Tao of vampire hunters. However smart you think characters like Reed Richards or Dr. Doom or Tony Stark or whoever else are in regards to science shit, Blade is that smart on vampires and the supernatural in general. So knowing these ancient rituals, knowing how to mobilize the vampires, knowing how to put together a team that can take down the Avengers, if anyone would know how to do it, it would be Blade. So that is very much on brand in that regard for him. And this isn't really even Blade's first time breaking bad. We actually saw him break bad back in 1993 during the Midnight Massacre story arc in Ghost Rider Volume 3, number 40. He tried to use the Darkhold in an attempt to get an edge on destroying Lilith and the vampires. However, all it did was corrupt him and turn him into a more vampiric monster. Speaking of which, there's some other things going on with Blade as far as everything else goes. He does seem to have some vested interest in Miles Morales. There's a point somewhere in the middle of the book before we actually know the truth about what's going on with Blade 100%, where he seems to have something he wants Miles to do. We don't really have any inclination of exactly what that is. And considering the fact that Blade has recently teamed up with Miles over in his own Miles Morales Spider-Man series, I don't know if it's going to have anything to do with that per se, but he definitely thinks Miles can help him out. And I don't know, it's one of those things where I wonder just how much of a villain Blade is in all of this. Like, if it's one of those deals where he is just whole ass a bad guy, or if somewhere in there, maybe there's some long game he's playing that is gonna lead towards something bigger, or what. We also don't know what his daughter Bloodline is gonna be doing in this either. We know she's gonna have a tie-in series connected to Blood Hunt, but I mean, yeah, that's one of those I kind of feel like she is going to wind up being the one who has to help bring Blade back over to the light. But Bloodline is even having to work with Dracula to try and bring Blade to heel on this one. So I mean, yeah, it's safe to say Dracula's not crazy about what Blade's doing either. I don't know how much Jed McKay is going to take into account any of the things that happened in Blade's own solo series, but just going with some of the things that have happened, I can't help but wonder, like, what the hell is going on? Like, what is going on with Blade? Like, is it the Adana? Is it the Lightbringer sword that corrupted him? Is it Dracula's own blood? Or is it some perfect mixture of it all? Is it any of the stuff that had to do with what Deacon Frost tried to do to him in Bloodline's own series? I don't know if Jed McKay's taken all those factors into consideration, but I feel like they are still something to maybe keep an eye on just in case. Another thing that I do wonder about too, once again, you go back and look at this once you realize that Blade is the bad guy, is the opening monologue of Blood Hunt. Blade seems to say that this is how the world ends. This is my work. This has always been my work. And after so very long, I will complete it. This makes me wonder if what he's actually trying to do is just get rid of all vampires, because if all the vampires are out running around, running roughshod through the world, it would kind of make sense for Blade to be able to just go ahead and get to all of them at once. Though, I don't know, there's some other things he says later that kind of imply that he wouldn't do that either. But once again, all of this is in an effort for something greater. We don't really know exactly what Blade's ultimate plan is beyond just turning vampires into the apex predators of the world. But it seems he picked a very interesting time to do all this, considering that the X-Men are pretty busy right now doing other stuff, and the other characters of the Marvel Comics universe are just kind of getting dragged down into it. And we know that pretty much every current Avenger, with the exception of Captain America, has fallen to Blade and his blood coven. You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.